He leaned back in his chair, the dim glow of the ship's console reflecting off the polished metal of his armor. "I've hunted Deathworlders in 3 systems now," he said, his voice low and confident, a hint of pride threading every word. "Not a single one survived long enough to see me leave." His fellow crew members had exchanged half-impressed, half-wary glances. Bragging wasn't unusual on these long missions, but there was something about him, a calm certainty that made it seem more like fact than ego. She stood by the viewport, arms crossed, watching the stars drift past. Her ship's engines hummed softly beneath her feet, a steady rhythm that echoed her own pulse. She didn't respond at first. He was used to attention, to admiration. But this wasn't admiration. Her gaze was sharp, piercing, almost clinical. "And you've killed many?" she asked finally, her voice quiet, almost melodic against the low hum of the ship. He straightened, chest swelling with pride. "Many enough to know that I can survive anything out there. These creatures, they're dangerous, yes, but I've faced them all. I've faced worse. I've faced worlds where survival is the only law, and I came out on top." Her eyes narrowed slightly, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "And yet you speak as if it's all a game, as if Deathworlders exist only to test you." He laughed softly, a sound half amused, half arrogant. "In a way, yes. Out there, life doesn't wait. You adapt, or you die. I adapt better than most." She didn't laugh. Instead, she took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "Have you ever wondered why they fight so fiercely?" she asked. "Why they refuse to surrender even when death is certain?" Her question hung in the air, heavier than any weapon he had faced on those savage planets. For a moment, he had no answer. Not because he didn't know, but because no one had ever asked him to consider it. "They're dangerous," he finally said, his voice lower now, uncertain. "They attack without mercy. They kill, or they try to." She tilted her head, studying him. "And yet, you call it hunting. You call it sport. You see only yourself in the story, the hunter, the conqueror. But have you ever stopped to think that perhaps they're only defending, everything they have left?" He frowned. He wasn't used to this. Most people either cheered when he spoke of his kills or stayed silent, uncomfortable with his stories. But she was asking him to see the universe differently, to question the foundation of his pride. I don't know," he admitted. "Finally, I've never thought of it that way." His hand hovered near the edge of the console, unsure if he wanted to touch it or not. "I hunt to survive, to prove myself." She stepped closer, the hum of the ship seeming to fade between them. "Survival is one thing," she said softly, almost whispering, "but hunting for glory, or pride, and that is something else entirely." He swallowed, a lump forming in his throat. Her words were not a threat. They were not an accusation. They were a mirror, reflecting a side of himself he had never wanted to see. And yet, he could not look away. "I've killed," he said finally, his voice rougher than before. "I've killed Deathworlders. I've tracked them across deserts, through jungles, across frozen wastelands. I've done things that I'm not proud of." His hand clenched into a fist at his side. "And still, I survived." Her gaze softened, but it did not lose its intensity. "Surviving is not the same as understanding," she said. "You've lived, yes, but have you truly seen?" He didn't answer. For the first time, the silence of space pressed in on him, a quiet reminder that the universe did not care about pride or about medals, about stories told in hushed awe around distant fires. "I will show you," she said, turning away from the viewport. "There is a planet, one that few humans have seen, one where Deathworlders are not simply obstacles, but guardians, survivors, families." He followed her, curiosity overcoming pride. The ship descended into the system, a small world that hung in the void like a jewel cloaked in mist from orbit. It seemed serene, beautiful, almost peaceful, the kind of place he had never expected to find in the stories of Deathworlders. As the landing bay doors opened, the air smelled of wet soil and strange vegetation. Colors he had never seen via almost blinding stretched across the horizon. Creatures moved cautiously in the distance, their shapes both alien and familiar. They watched him, not with aggression, but with wariness. She pointed to a clearing where a small group of Deathworlders moved carefully, tending to something in the soil. "They're planting," she said. "They build, they nurture, they protect, they fight to live. Yes, but also to care, to preserve." He watched in silence. The stories he had told himself of monsters, of savage enemies, began to crumble. Each movement, each small act of care, chipped away at the armor of pride he had wrapped around himself. "And yet," she continued, "humans often see only the danger, only the challenge. You hunt, you conquer, you return home with tales of triumph, but they live." His hands clenched at his sides. The weight of his past actions pressed on him in a way he had never imagined. The faces of those he had killed, those he had thought of as nothing more than obstacles, flickered in his mind. He had been proud, boastful, blind. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Because," she said, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder, "you are more than a hunter. You are human, and humans have the capacity to see, to understand, to change. Even when the universe teaches only survival, you can choose compassion." The word struck deeper than any weapon. He swallowed hard, trying to reconcile the man he had been with the man he wanted to become. Pride and glory felt hollow in this moment, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar understanding. A small Deathworlder approached, cautious, but not fearful. Its eyes, dark and intelligent, regarded him silently. For a long moment, they simply watched one another. Then, slowly, it bowed its head, a gesture of trust he had never imagined possible. She smiled. "Not all warriors are meant to kill. Some are meant to witness, to learn, to protect." He nodded, feeling the first stirrings of humility, of respect. The hunt had been his life, but he realized now that life itself was more complex than the stories he had told, more fragile. More beautiful days passed as they moved among the Deathworlders, learning their ways, understanding their lives. He saw the bonds that held them together, the fierce love and loyalty they shared. He watched them fight, not for pride, but for survival, for family, for the future. And with each passing day, the hunter within him softened, replaced by something stronger and more enduring, a respect for life itself. By the time they left the planet, he was a changed man. The pride he had carried was not gone, but it had been tempered by understanding, by humility. He no longer boasted of kills, of victories. Instead, he spoke of lessons learned, of worlds seen, of life in all its forms. She watched him silently as they departed orbit. "You've changed," she said, her tone light but knowing. "I have," he admitted, "and not because I survived, but because I finally saw." Her smile was faint but warm, like the first light of dawn on a distant world. "Then perhaps you are ready," she said, "to become more than just a hunter, to become a protector, to become human in the truest sense." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle comfortably on his shoulders. For the first time, he understood that courage was not in killing, but in seeing, in understanding, in choosing to protect rather than destroy. As the stars streaked past the viewport once more, he realized that the universe was vast, full of danger, yes, but also full of life, waiting to be understood. And he would face it not with prideful arrogance, but with the quiet strength of someone who had learned the true meaning of survival. And somewhere deep within him, a small, unspoken gratitude grew for the question that had left him speechless, and for the presence of someone who had dared to make him see. Because, in the end, hunting Deathworlders had never been about proving himself. It had been about avoiding the one truth he had feared most, that survival without understanding is no victory at all. He looked at her once more, and in that gaze he saw not judgment, but trust. And in that trust he found the courage to be something more. The universe was not a hunting ground, it was a classroom, and he, finally, was ready to learn.